Hi, everyone. Welcome to xAPI cohort. Guess what? Week 12. That's it. Right. This is the last one. So we're so excited to have Chris Tompkins here from Rustici. He's going to be talking about navigating procurement and interoperability. Interoperability. I don't think I said that right, but stakeholders and xAPI. So basically, how do things work together? He is the VP of Business Development at Rustici. And before we get started, DevLearn next week. So the last day to register online is tomorrow. After that, no online registration. You have to register in person in Vegas. And then, of course, November 2nd is our xAPI party, where we're going to look at all kinds of different projects, a lot of different xAPI projects, some of the work that you've worked on during cohort. We're so excited. Please pull up a chair, see the xAPI party in action. I'm going to drop some links in chat. And then, of course, we have the research report, the state of data and analytics in L&D for 2023. We have 3 people there who are the authors. It's a really great research report if you're interested in data, and I'll drop a link into the chat. And of course, this is the Learning Guild. And if you're not a member, please become a member. There's so many different ways that you can interact with our community. Plus, you get discounts to face-to-face conferences. You get all kinds of research reports for free, event discounts, webinars, all kinds of things, and it's all free. So I will drop a link to join the guild if you're not already a member. And with that, I'm going to turn things over to Chris. And Chris, when you're ready, go ahead and start sharing.
Yeah, well, thank you everybody for being here. I'm Chris Tompkins. It's great to see some people I know. Hi, Megan. I shocked you're here. I guess it's the last one and you want to put a bow here at the end. But thank you for coming through the cohort. These are my people. So it's good to know you. Please, lifetime warranty, reach out at any time if there are things that I can do to help in the future. But today we're going to talk about procurement and interoperability. These are tools in the toolbox. And just because you've completed this 12-week program doesn't necessarily mean that some of these words are the right things to add to your projects, but they might be. And as the guy who deals with almost all of the paperwork at Rustici, I'm the VP of Biz Dev, but I sell things and sign things at a simple level. Rustici might not be a name that you guys have heard of too much. We are not a household brand, but we are behind the scenes nearly everywhere in the e-learning industry. Put simply, we only do 3 things as a company. We are the Save As button behind the scenes in a lot of authoring products, Adobe's Captivate, Articulate Storyline, Domino's Claro. If you publish as SCORM, AICC, TinCan, whatever, it's probably us. On the other side of the coin, we are the player behind the scenes in a lot of learning management systems around the world, several hundreds. So Blackboard, Canvas, Bridge, Desire to Learn, Paycom, Workday, the list is actually quite long. And there are a bunch of tools that live in between there, like Open Sesame, GoOne, and a bunch of others that we help do the magic of. So Rustici is kind of not an interesting brand to a lot of people unless you find yourself living in an ecosystem of learning tools, in which case we're behind the scenes in a lot of places. But today we're going to talk a lot about how to ensure that the systems that you guys are imagining, the systems that you're building, the things that you have in mind to use the new skills that you've learned here in this program, how you take those into the market, whether it's government organizations, large corporates, small startups. There's a number of different ways that you need to consider the way that these are implemented and procured. We're going to talk through some conversations to have with stakeholders so that you begin to pinpoint what's important. And we are going to talk a little bit about RFPs, requests for proposals, which is where government and large brands typically do a lot of their fact-finding and buying initiatives. So finally, we can talk a little bit about xAPI 2.0. Megan Torrance and I both sit on an IEEE LTSC board that officially blessed the xAPI specification in its 2.0 form, which takes it out of just the DoD sector through ADL and DoD 132226, but more of a standard that hopefully the whole world can embrace. So big thanks to Megan for driving that forward with the rest of us. So what do I mean by that? We've got some weird concepts. At the bottom of the screen, that is the logo for ADL. It's Rustici's patron saint. The only custom work we really do as a business is for the ADL. It is a Department of Defense sponsored think tank that is the ultimate keeper of the SCORM, AICC, and xAPI specifications. The ADL also mandates that government entities through the Department of Defense and some other federal agencies through something called a DoDI, a Department of Defense Instruction. 132226 is the number that basically says you must be using SCORM or CMI5 as we go forward. So TLA, this is the ADL's big picture of what is going to happen over the next 20 years within the Department of Defense and larger federal organizations. xAPI is a specification that is a part of the TLA that is essentially the plumbing that's going to allow data and activities and tracking metrics to be shared across silos. And then CMI5 is kind of the most tactical part of this. It is the launchable unit that is a part of these procurement processes that will allow learning management systems, authoring tool providers, off-the-shelf things, all interact with one another in an elegant way. So ADL is the big organization, TLA is their plan, xAPI is the protocol, and CMI5 is a unit. It is an inverted pyramid type of structure to the way that these things are playing out. So conformance and compliance are two different words. There are some folks at Rustici that really care about the pedantry between those two things. For me, we just want to be sure we're all on the same page. Interoperability is this moment, as you guys know, that helps two unrelated pieces of technology play nicely. And I think it's very important for us to be able to test and prove. Facts are friendly. If a course isn't playing and tracking in an environment, did the person building the course mess up, or is the player doing something it shouldn't? Without the ability to test, it gets really hard. So we want to be sure that when you're procuring the right tools, that vendors should provide the documents that their stuff has been tested. And there are some free and open source test suites available through Project Catapult, both at xapi.com and at ADL's site, to help verify that courses are what they should be and that players are doing what they should be. So we have the ability to prove some of these things. Facts are friendly. And when we are working on these type of larger projects, we want to be sure that we're vetting tested materials. You also, though, don't want to mandate things. The SCORM and AICC content that's out there, if you have a beginning, a middle, an end, and an assessment that needs to be played through a learning management system, please don't go and just mandate xAPI or CMI5 because it's the newest. You could add 6 figures to your project to go redo a lot of that work. So continuing to support legacy things is going to be okay. Much like reaching into a toolbox and grabbing a screwdriver, a socket, or a wrench. You don't care about which one's new. You want the one that fits the fit for purpose that you have. So be sure that you're also being respectful of those things. And as content creators, your authoring tools should be tested to be sure that it plays and tracks before you blindly give it to a customer to run in their own LMS. There are a bunch of test suites. Again, SCORM Cloud is a free tool that we offer to help you test stuff to make sure that everybody's on the same page. The test suites for the new things are available as the content conformance test suite. There's also a test suite just for LMS players to be sure that things are behaving the way that they should. And also at the larger level, the xAPI Learning Record Store, as you guys know, the special database where your xAPI statements must live, also has a test suite. This can help you guys make sure that you're comparing apples to apples, or at least as you bid on a project, if you're building your own tools, that you are able to show a prospective buyer that you've done your due diligence and that things are progressing as they should. So navigating procurement, this has become my career. Kind of a weird place to end up for sure. But the procurement process in the federal space is supposed to always be the same, this big rigid thing with the FAR clauses that give it structure. In my experience, they're always a little bit different. You should think about the way that your projects are impacted by the things that you're trying to buy. Learners, administrators, content authors, your decision makers, your executives, your procurement people, the lawyers, everybody involved in buying a big, complicated piece of infrastructure has the things that they care about, and their jobs, their roles, their budgets, their manpower is always impacted. So being sure that you talk to all of the people in the chain that matter to this xAPI or CMI5 project is a key step in being successful. Are there existing relevant systems or data that are compatible or incompatible with your chosen standards? This is almost a fact-finding mission. The ecosystem that you live in is only useful if all of the tools in it have an agreed upon set of rules. The music industry uses the MP3, and no one in a band finishes their song, and Megan and I might start a duo, and I don't have to look her dead in the eye after writing a song and saying, okay, now, are you going to publish that as an MP3 or am I? The authoring tool does that for us. So being sure that the MP3 goes out in a band's language, no one has to be a technical expert in these moments. Once we get to procurement, we need to align with the standards that work. And in this room, it's SCORM, AICC, CMI5. Those type of standards allow us as an instructional designer to create a unit of a thing that has a beginning, a middle, and an end, that tracks things the same way and can go out in the e-learning world and just play. Much like if we had a band, we would use the MP3 as that connection moment. So explaining this to people in the buying chain, in the procurement chain, helping them understand the role that you're playing with a relative example can often save you a lot of head scratching, because this stuff can be complicated, as the last 12 weeks of your program have certainly outlined. The tools, systems, data lakes, reports involved, understanding who is in charge of those things and what standards do those tools already provide can help you guys more elegantly stitch together what I think is a quilt work of data that you guys are trying to showcase. And then I think it's my favorite point probably of this whole thing. All xAPI projects should be guided by the end in mind. Please don't go track everything using xAPI because you took a cool course that told you you could. I work with a lot of these projects and have been around since xAPI was born. And the end in mind is the key detail that drives one successful project from a meandering, never-ending kludge of people working really hard. So having that end in mind, knowing what your xAPI data should show you, knowing where it lives, where it goes, and who cares, that's going to be the most efficient way to be sure that you're procuring the right tool or participating as a vendor in the right process with your customers. And then finally, once you know what that end in mind is, finding the tools, the relevant standards to stitch it all together, that becomes very important. If we know the pie chart we need to cook up, we can have a reasonable argument about the ingredients and the order of operations necessary to cook it up. So knowing what you need will help you look into your current toolkit, find what's compatible, and then go procure the things that you need for those next steps. It's a key moment. So what to ask, let's go next slide. When to acquire systems and content. So when you want to capture more detailed learning data than you get from SCORM, which is time, completion, pass, fail, score. LTI 1.1 is just completion. AICC is pretty limited, but gets you to time, completion, score, pass, fail pretty elegantly. If you have defined that this project needs to track far more than that and do more than just a death by PowerPoint with a quiz at the end, which certainly has its place in the compliance world, that's the moment where CMI5 and xAPI provide more detailed data about what's going on. It's more than just question and answers. We could use AR, VR, XR to understand learning behaviors, to understand training behaviors, to find moments that instructional designers didn't build into a do you A, stop, drop, and roll, B, fire, grab the fire extinguisher, C, do something different. Without this type of tracking, it makes it very difficult for instructional designers to be able to get to granular things, to measure what's working in the real world, correlate it with the learning and training, finding the person who's best at their job, understanding what training and learning impacts made them the rock star at their company, and investing in those things later next year. I feel very strongly that teams that can study the outcomes of their learning and training can be better stewards of the budget, do more with less money in a faster motion than companies who are guessing. So I think using these tools to provide more detail when needed is important, but you shouldn't go ruin the basic training just because you want to do more. Sometimes time completion, pass fail score are enough. The other way is that I did look through some of the little bubbles with names and saw some really interesting job titles here inside of this cohort. Thank you for being here. That's very exciting. But if you are either selling to or work at a military or federal organization, understanding DoD 132226 and their fungible resources becomes important. I know that that sounds like a pretty dry topic, but 132226 should be very, very, very interesting for almost everybody in this room. It is the thing that said, if you want to sell a course to the military, it can be whatever you want it to be, so long as the deliverable is SCORM. It is the thing years ago that set SCORM on its path. We've seen xAPI and CMI5 adoption go faster than SCORM did, starting 23 years ago. And I think that DoD 132226 should help your teams follow the law if you're working at a federal organization, or understand specifically what that type of buyer might need. There are a bunch of you in the middle, maybe working at universities or at private companies going, why do I care about 132226? I mean, eventually these are the things that trickle their way into corporate, that trickle their way into high compliance training. We see them used and adopted by finance and real estate and pharmaceuticals and healthcare. 132226 is a governing set of rules that should impact almost everybody in the cohort. You wouldn't be here paying attention to xAPI if it weren't for ADL, and 132226 is the teeth that ADL has within this space. So certainly worth Googling and at least glancing at. But it has evolved, and it is starting to say you've got to use CMI5 and xAPI going forward, which is pretty exciting. So if you're buying things, we're going to need to ask vendors about their support with xAPI and CMI5. You should begin those conversations, because I'm also a human who talks to all of these different vendors. And when you ask them, hey, what are your plans for xAPI? And they go, no customer has ever even started a conversation about these things, it means that they're not interested. Vendors go where their teams tell them that their customers demand things. So even if you can't buy it from your vendors today, asking them during renewals, what are your plans for CMI5? How are you using xAPI? Are you involved in things? Matters. When you're talking about your contracts with the different vendor reps, customer success managers, account managers, whoever you might be renewing or working with, you should be talking up to them about their plans for these new standards coming up. Conversely, if you work at a vendor site, you should have these conversations with your clients to say, hey, I'm excited about this. I just finished the xAPI cohort. Here are the plans on a long-term basis for our company moving forward. Vendors and buyers having conversations around xAPI and interoperability are the only way both sides understand that this is important and that it matters. That's my third bullet point. When outcomes matter, when you guys live in an ecosystem, big brands, large federal agencies often have 20 to 30 learning tools being used at one time within their organization. This is an ecosystem, and it's always an ecosystem. And everyone on this call is going to be participating in an ecosystem. So the outcomes matter. At the end of the day, what are the stakeholders really trying to get done? Once we understand that goal, we can pull these systems and these tools together in a way that plays nicely with one another. That's the whole point of all of these things. But until you have that end in mind, we don't know which of the 20 or 30 tools have an impact. Not all of them should go do the work to support xAPI and CMI5 overnight, but some of them should. And those are the ones that we need to focus on. And you'll only get that focus if you're really intentional about what you need to do. And then finally, during budgeting, I think it's important for both buyers and sellers to be talking about these standards as they renew, but as they go through what forward facing looks like. I think budgets can actually be reduced in a lot of ways if everybody in the ecosystem is agreed upon a standard to use. But if you're only picking and choosing and forcing a tool that you love to do xAPI, again, it might be a six-figure add to the budget, even though it's not really that necessary. So being curious about people's plans for these standards is important. Mandating that they give you these things, ooh, that's a little more dangerous, and I don't know that I would advocate for that. So which came first? It's a chicken and egg situation, or as Alicia's built here in the slides, a cephalopod and egg situation. We got to know when to ask. And right now we are at a weird moment in the way things are procuring where vendors aren't super aware, buyers aren't super aware, and we need to have these conversations happening almost at every stage so that both sides see the value. So you should have those conversations today, regardless of where you are. Now that you're through this program, we need to make sure that you're out there being a little bit of a standards evangelist around using some of these things in the right way. And you should have those conversations anytime you can. I promise, if they've never heard of it before, the second call they make is to somebody here at Rustici, and we get to talk them through a similar conversation. So very important. It's a key moment. And this is how awareness is raised, because whether you're a vendor telling customers for the first time about xAPI or CMI5, they should get excited. They go talk to other vendors. Those vendors hear about it for the first time. It creates a chain of echoes that is impactful in the way that people buy and procure different tools. So navigating it can be pretty tricky. Sometimes there are many people involved. And I even read a trend in some business journal this week that procurement teams are growing. So you're entering more and more humans into a thing. The fun part is that, as boring and nerdy as standards are, they're the things that help procurement people get to a source of truth. Facts are friendly. This has been tested. It works. We know what we're buying. It's compatible. It works with our system. It makes it so much easier for people on the procurement side or on a vendor side to agree that this is the right path forward and the right pace. So what are the tools and the platforms involved capable of? What do they save as? What do they publish as? What can they import, play, and track? How do reports work? Those type of simple questions, to those of you who have been in this program and are now pretty expert at these things, need to bubble up, because not everybody in your organization is as familiar with these things as you are. Are they conformant to the standards? Have they been tested? Does somebody have proof that they're doing the right thing? Can the data be exported and shared in a non-proprietary way? For years and years and years, learning management systems have been about 80% of a company's learning budget, and that they prefer that all of their tracking happens in their own ecosystem. They would love for you to build tools in their system. They would love for you to import your content into their system. But SCORM and AICC never had methods that allow you to pack up your content, pack up your tracking information, and go play nicely somewhere else. xAPI and CMI5 encourage that. And so talking to vendors that do have the ability to take your data and go use it somewhere else become really good targets for xAPI data conversions, for statement pipes, if they already support things, for data forwarding out of one LRS to another, and avoid those silos. You never want to end up in a situation where all of your e-learning tools only work with their e-learning products. We need an ecosystem to get along. It's why these standards matter. And proprietary things should be a turnoff if you're a vendor trying to sell or if you're a buyer trying to buy. Does the vendor offer multiple tools intended to be integrated? If those tools are a little extensible, they have an authoring product, but it can be exported as SCORM, you're fine. If they have an authoring product that only works in their LMS and the data is locked away into that LMS's only reports, that's a little risky. And if you are in that situation after looking at the tools, looking at the stakeholders and the things that you're trying to do, that seems like a long-term project to either figure out data exporting and fix that problem. A lot of these ecosystems are really nice and easy to use and have a great learner experience. And all you need to do is learn how to get your data out. But avoid those silos. Putting your ships all in one bottle isn't recommended anymore. And the whole point of these standards is to help you be a better member of this, ecosystem, this community of products within a big organization. So xAPI 2.0. Megan's here. You can ask her a bunch of questions about this as well. But effectively, the IEEE is the group that blesses a lot of the international standards, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth. There's a bunch of them out there. So now that the IEEE has created xAPI 2.0, it's more than just an ADL type of specification. This is a full-on standard, and CMI 5 is a core part of xAPI 2.0. Effectively, as you guys know, CMI 5 is the launchable unit. It's the thing that an LMS can import, play, and track on. And you want to start leveraging that as long as you're living in an ecosystem that supports CMI 5. You want to confirm that your LMS and vendors have support for it, at least on their roadmap. Rustici is releasing our first iteration of the xAPI 2.0 player imminently. A lot of different tools will follow suit as we upgrade our products behind the scenes. And having that conversation with your customers will at least help you understand their ability to look down the road and have this released. It's candidly not a huge lift. It's not a massive shift in xAPI from its initial versions to 2.0. So I don't think we're asking the world to go move mountains here. But if they go xAPI what, you know a lot about their timeline at that point. We offer some blogs on xapi.com if you want to learn more about that. There's nothing to buy at xapi.com. It's straight up just free tools, guides, insights, how-to materials there. I'm sure people on this call have been there before, but our recent blog will help explain xAPI 2.0 in a little more detail if you do find that interesting. So don't forget, you're at the end of a 12-week program. You're about to go back to all of your colleagues and get excited and try to move things. E-learning standards move at glacial speeds, but they do move and they're very powerful. I've worked at Rustici 13 years. I never thought I would be an e-learning standards interoperability expert, but if I've learned nothing else, it's that as hype as we can get and as much as we want to push, some of these things move slowly. Its age is its strength. Other standards in your life are quite old. MP3 is well over 25 years old. The PDF, the Excel file, .xlsx, these things are going to be with us in 5 years. These things are going to be with us in 10 years or 15 years. I think the PDF has a very long road ahead of it. Standard specifications, these things move very slowly, but they are very stable. The education you've just poured on yourselves over the last 12 years should be a lasting impression. Can't go out in the world and change it overnight, but you're part of now this little army that's out there kind of moving things around. Vendors might not support these things yet. Don't get too discouraged. The serious conversations you're having around them will guide their product roadmap. 2.0 should have a longer shelf life because the IEEE is very methodical in the way that they go through these things. It's been fun to sit on that group. And Megan and I are in awe of what these really smart people do, but more importantly, the rigorous process so that oopses don't happen on the other side. I think moving this to an IEEE specification is going to give it a long life. And then take into consideration what you need to accomplish. Again, that end in mind is the best thing you can do to help future-proof a lot of your work. So here's a timeline. I feel like it's important after I pour a little cold water on your energy and say that these things move slowly, but 1998, I'm in high school at the time. The AICC specification was built by the aviation industry. Take us up to today. This becomes a pretty long career of folks helping the e-learning ecosystem play nicely with one another. I was around at Rustici when we started work on Project Tin Can, which later turned into the Training and Learning Architecture Experience API on behalf of ADL. So even though some of these things feel new, CMI5 was released in 2016. We are still pushing these things forward. There are only a few humans on Earth that wake up every day excited to talk about e-learning interoperability, and I work with like 50 of them. So we're a niche. You're now a part of that niche. And every time we are talking about these ecosystems, we should be driving things forward with this timeline in our mind of it's okay that they move slowly. Slow is steady, steady is fast. And when you're dealing with literally thousands of e-learning vendors needing to get on the same page at the same time with the same standard, this is a real slog of a process at times, but I promise it does move. I promise it is stable, and I promise it is valuable to everything. So where to find examples of acquisition guidance? This is a little more federal than maybe some of you at other organizations need. But again, these are the professionals that have put a lot of thought into it, and the rigor that they bring to the procurement process, I think, is valuable to nearly everyone else. I'm not suggesting you all adopt these type of things, but understanding what's happening there, especially if you work at a federal organization or want to sell to one, this becomes a really, really interesting set of resources. So I highly recommend that you check each of those out. And I'm sure Alicia and Tara can drop some comments in the chat if you need direct links, because I don't think you can click on the screen. I will be speaking next week. I'll be in Las Vegas. If any of you are at DevLearn, please come hang out with me. You're my people. I would love to hear how the cohort went for you and, you know, have a conversation around that. I will also be speaking about some of these topics as well, less about procurement and more about the relationship with SCORM and xAPI. So if you would like to attend that, I will certainly be there, but we'll also have a booth, and we're a pretty fun crowd to hang out with, even though we do nerdy things for a living. So please, I hope we can connect there together. So are there any questions? It looks like there are. So I will just take it from Martin. For someone who wants to make content to sell to businesses and organizations, wants to use the features that CMI5 offers over above SCORM and AICC. However, if a company has an LMS that does not support CMI5, they can't buy it. Then I call a company that makes the LMS and they say that no one is asking for it. So yeah, Martin, this is that chicken and egg or octopus and egg situation. And you are the first that caused that to happen. They've heard about it now. They can't use that excuse twice. There are also some tricks up your sleeves. SCORM can certainly still work there. Rustici has some magic, candidly, that can play CMI5 content through what appears to be a small, easy-to-use SCORM 1.2 package that gets us into Moodle and some other LMSs that might not have innovated that far already. So there are some tips and tricks there. As long as you're building that content in an authoring product, being able to save it out as CMI5 should also enable you to just save it out as SCORM. I wouldn't say, oh, we don't want to go backwards and ever use SCORM again. That probably just locks you out of some opportunities that you would otherwise be able to participate in. But showing them, hey, we could do more if your LMS had support for this thing, they will go push on the LMS for you. Those vendors have to upgrade eventually. They only want to put spend and dev effort into things customers are asking for. And so while it might feel like you're kind of faced with a loss there when the LMS doesn't support it yet, there are a number that do. And every time you and your customers go to those LMS providers, it is another coin in that piggy bank that's going to help them vote for the next piece of work we should implement is that CMI5 player itself. So, Martin, I know that can be frustrating, but I think causing that conversation is a little more valuable than you might actually realize. From Mary, we're experiencing the same thing with some of our vendors, particularly with a development tool and xAPI. So yeah, this is the chicken and egg thing every time. Because you find tools that you like, understanding the other publishable options becomes important. You know, you could have the nicest socket set in the whole world, but if it takes a Phillips head screwdriver, that it's just never going to fit. And adapting a socket with a Phillips head, it's just a lot of work. So you want to always use the tools in the toolbox that are the right fit for purpose. And as excited as all of us in this room can be about xAPI and CMI5, if your customers don't have the ability to use those tools, they might as well not exist. But the thing that you can do is to cause those discussions, to cause those conversations. And I've been around long enough to know that this does work. And the advantage to you is that you deliver a superior product, a superior experience, and can better measure that learning ROI. The advantage to them is that they have to go have those conversations with their vendors and eventually end up with tools that are a better fit for their needs. Ideally, if all of us are talking about this, when they do go buy that next LMS, it is one of the requirements in the RFP, and it immediately filters out a bunch of folks that no one in this room really wants to work with. So I think having those conversations and being able to be progressive in the way that we're trying to procure things with an eye to just get it done. I would hate for you guys to walk on business where SCORM would have worked. That's not the point of a new standard. It's enabling better things and trying to have better tools in those learning ecosystems is a key driver of success there. So Martin, the SCORM wrapper for a CMI5 sounds like a solution. Danger, danger, danger. It's not really a wrapper. It's not a SCORM zip with CMI5 inside it. That's the wrong thing. Rustici has some witchcraft that we actually sell. I'm not here to sell these tools, but it puts a proxy file that looks like a SCORM package or an LTI link or an AICC package somewhere. It launches, we stream it using our player so we can do some advanced things. And when it exits, it talks back to the LMS through whatever little proxy file we set up. So happy to explore those things with you guys if that's interesting. Certainly not while I'm here. But I am trying to kind of illustrate that building a bridge between these solutions can sometimes be your best intermediary in order to do what you want to do and also get it into a system that might not support it today. Being clever in those moments is important. It's the way Rustici thought its way around it. And I know we're not the only ones. So there are other commercially viable tools out there doing similar strategies. As much as I love CMI5, I think its application is really impressive in AR, VR, XR, simulations, real world tracking, things that are happening outside of a web browser are particularly interesting, with the full embrace that sometimes it might be easier just to deliver in SCORM 1.2 content, track things in your own way, convert that stuff to xAPI, and we help a bunch of learning platforms automatically convert SCORM and AICC tracking data into xAPI, store it in an LRS, and then statement forward it where it needs to go. So just because you want to use this stuff doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to just have keys that fits in those locks. So there are creative and clever workarounds, either embedding in a SCORM file some xAPI calls, danger, danger, be careful, don't get too wild with that. But there are some other ways to make sure that you're delivering what you want through SCORM and also tracking the things that are relevant and important for your end in mind. Feel free to turn it back over. So I think I've hit my 39 minutes here. Thank you all for being here. You're my last call of the day, so if we need to stay and hang out, that's cool. But I understand that there's some other things the cohort wants to accomplish today. So thank you, Karen, for setting this up, and thank you everybody for your attention. Yeah, and look forward to diving in deeper. You've become my people.
Thank you so much, Chris. That was a trek into nerdy world, which is great because a lot of people are in nerdy world as we're going through xAPI and everything. So that's it for cohort, everybody. I dropped links into chat. That is a wrap. That is amazing. This is our spring, right? No, fall cohort. I'm getting so confused. Fall cohort. We'll have another one in spring. The dates will be announced later on the Guild site. And don't forget, we have the xAPI party on November 2nd. And of course, all the wonderful things that's happening at DevLearn with xAPI. Megan Torrance was kind enough to put those links in chat. If you're going to DevLearn, make sure you check them out and make sure you register for the xAPI party. You'll see that in my link in chat as well as on the Guild website. And we are thrilled that you were here with us, and we look forward to the next cohort. Thanks, everyone.